Hello, everyone. I'm Dan, the benefit design lead here at Thanks Ben. For those who may not be familiar with us, Ben are the global flexible benefits platform provider. We're dedicated to helping businesses create personalized, impactful benefit strategies for their employees. If you'd like to connect or learn more outside of this session, please feel free to reach out to me or someone else in the Thanks Ben team directly after today's call. But today, I'm excited to be joined by experts from the IVF Network, Seniorcare by Lottie, and the National Bereavement Service. Together, we'll be able to explore how to support your team, your employees, through every different life stage, from birth to loss. I will now ask and pass over to the panelists to introduce themselves and the companies that they are representing today. So I guess, Hannah, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. I'm the Senior Customer Care Manager at Seniorcare by Lottie. So I'm helping to build and deliver the service that supports individuals managing their eldercare journey.
Anne?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anne. I originally trained as a nurse and midwife, but have spent 35 plus years working with bereaved people in a variety of settings, both NHS, legal and helplines. And I'm a non-executive director of National Bereavement Service, which provides information, advice and support to both members of the public and to companies as an employee benefit around a bereavement and legal matters.
Perfect. And then Charlotte? I can't hear you at the moment. There you go.
I thought after so many years that I would have been able to take myself off mute. Apologies. Hello, I'm Charlotte. I'm the CEO and founder of the IVF Network. I've worked in the corporate market for many, many years myself. Currently, we provide an employee benefit to help anybody who is going through a fertility-related problem in the workplace. But we also have a membership of over 10,000 consumers who we are helping on a daily basis through community and through content and broadcast material, working with the top private experts in the fertility sector, and therefore providing that benefit to businesses as a key part of their strategy.
Thank you very much, everyone. So I guess before we kick everything off, I think it'll be good just to recap, I guess, on what we're going to be planning to cover in today's webinar. So number one, understanding that the employer's role in key life stages like birth and bereavement. Two, tips for using sensitive language in workplace communications. Number three, balancing work with childcare and eldercare responsibilities. Four, addressing that longer term impact of unresolved grief. And then five, creating that holistic benefits offering that will support your employees through every life stage moment. And just as an FYI here, we'll also have some time at the end of today's session for a Q&A. So please feel free to submit your questions as we go along. So if we look to commence today's session, I guess if we look at that kind of first topic, which is that role of the employer, how has the role of the employer changed over the years in relation to supporting employees' key stages of life? So, for example, creating life and death. And I guess this is a question for all of you. It's all relevant. So I guess, Hannah, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure Charlotte and Anne will kind of echo my initial point, which is just anyone going through a life stage like the ones that we're representing today, it's inexplicably linked with their ability to be able to do their work. And it feels as though employers are thankfully waking up to the responsibility that they have in that, how it benefits them by having a workforce that they look after, and therefore they are engaged and they're able to maintain a high level of performance. I mean, from my kind of remit in eldercare, just in April this year, the Carers Leave Act was put in place, which now mandates that employers have to give individuals in their workforce 10 days of unpaid leave for caregiving responsibilities. So, yeah, you can start to see legislation coming in. There's a lot more that we can be doing and should be doing. But from my perspective, that's where we're at the moment. And it's good to see responsibilities to start being taken place by employers.
Perfect. And I guess just my question for me then, actually, on top of that, I guess, are you seeing increased demand then, Hannah, in terms of from different clients, companies, regardless of industry vertical?
Yeah, I mean, any HR professionals we speak to, not even just HR professionals, to be honest, just any professionals that we speak to, when we talk about elder care and the responsibilities of caregiving, whether it's somebody that has personal experience of that or just understands the story that we're telling, they're sort of surprised to hear that there's not a more kind of standard offering of elder care support, that it is quite a new thing. And I'm sure Anne and Charlotte can kind of speak to their areas as well, but we're absolutely seeing more demand. The uptake that we see of the companies that we do work with, everybody just kind of says, why don't we have this benefit sooner, which is a sad but also a positive thing to look at, I suppose.
Is that the same for you, Anne and Charlotte?
After you, Charlotte.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, every time that we talk to businesses day in, day out, and every time we have a conversation with another company, they absolutely want and need what we're delivering, and largely also because it's very easy to demonstrate the retention and the attraction rates of caring for people who are going through fertility treatment, which is the area that we sit in, alongside bereavement and the loss that you experience through fertility, and what people have to go through, generally speaking. I mean, there's been such a huge uplift in recognizing the responsibility that people in the workplace have to take to support each other, in terms of every pathway through life, and we're experiencing the fertility piece because it's now such a big problem, and it's a global problem, and we're actually sitting in a declining population and a declining society, because so many people are actually only having one child rather than more than two. It's becoming a very serious going concern, especially even actually the education piece, and informing key people within organizations of actually what this really means and what fertility treatment actually means and what loss and bereavement actually mean. There's a huge wave of education now that's taking place, to enable people to have conversations even with much younger people within their organization. So the Gen Z demographic, as an example, we're finding huge swathes of companies wanting to educate around how to future-proof fertility, because we are sitting in such a global problem.
Amazing, thank you. And is that the same for you, Anna, National Bereavement Service?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I would like to highlight, which I think is also true for Hannah and Charlotte's area, is that it's very easy when you mention bereavement to somebody to think of emotional impact. But actually, if you're close to the person that's died, there are huge practical implications. Having had colleagues who've gone through fertility treatment, I know that, you know, there are physical consequences as well as the emotional things in time for appointments, bereavement. There are a raft of procedural, legal, practical things to take care of, and they also require time. So, for example, time isn't just needed off for emotional consequences, is actually going to register the death, possibly attending an inquest, which can be many months after the event, all sorts of things. And I'm sure, you know, for Hannah, actually visiting care homes and being certain that it's somewhere you would want to place your nearest and dearest, those are time occupying and onerous things to do, because people carry huge responsibilities at these times. So the support is very much across the breadth of all of that. And we know that at least 60% of people struggle with at least one aspect of the practical things to do after a death. And in terms of stats, it's reckoned that at least 6 people will be significantly emotionally impacted by every death.
Some fantastic points there. Thank you very much, all. We've talked about, I guess, that overall role of the employer, but then Charlotte, Hannah and Anne, you've all mentioned education being quite a key topic here, but then with that comes communication. So I guess, how can employers be mindful of the language that they use when communicating sensitive subjects to their employees? and equally how important is the language that is used to your employees as a big topic. So again, this is a question that's relevant to all of you, but maybe this time, Charlotte, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think within the remit that that we sit in, as far as fertility is concerned, it's a very highly personalised experience going through fertility treatment, and therefore every single person's reaction and response to what they're going through is going to be very different. I would say the overarching theme here is within a business to create that safety. I think the feeling of safety to be able to have open conversations at work is absolutely the first port of call. So it's a cultural piece in terms of businesses, of how they're able to actually really enable people to feel comfortable with having those conversations. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece really is understanding the person that you're going to sit in front of, and really being that ear and being able to listen to the person sitting in front of you, and also understand the kind of person that they are, and and therefore react accordingly. So obviously language is important at a level, but everybody is completely different. I mean, I for one, and I went through a 9-year fertility journey, which is why I've built the service offering that we deliver, because I understand exactly what people need and what they're going through. But I'm also a very stoic, pragmatic individual. Not everybody is wired in the same way as myself. So most people can say pretty much anything to me and it's not going to affect me, because I'm a bit like Teflon now, to be quite honest, based on what I've been through. But many people are deeply affected by a fertility journey and the physicality and the emotional impact that it has on people. And so adapting and being able to adapt to each situation as it arises is definitely key from our perspective, from an HR perspective, because everybody's experience is completely different and no one is the same.
Perfect. Really good answer. That personalized piece, I think, is very important, I guess, across all three areas today, isn't it? So I guess, Hannah, is that the same from an eldercare perspective? Any other points there?
Yeah, it's interesting, Charlotte, that you mentioned about how it is personal to the individual. And I absolutely agree. I similarly went through a personal experience of caregiving, and I'm sure that what I would have found helpful is very different to a colleague, a friend, or whoever. And I think because it is very personalized, that can almost make the task of navigating it even harder, because there's no just one answer on how to do it. And so it goes back to that education piece and just knowing the best practices and all of the options, and then you kind of have this toolkit of being able to deal with whatever situation, whatever individual that is going through whatever life stage. It's no mean feat, and I think there's no expectation for anyone to know how to do this on their own without taking the time to go and educate themselves from experts like ourselves that have dedicated careers to working out what the best thing is to do and to educate people. For us specifically, when it comes to eldercare, I suppose, again, it is another sensitive topic, but when we talk about language around eldercare, it can be quite condition specific. So we spend a lot of time supporting families whose loved ones are going through their journey of being diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and we see a lot of kind of tiptoeing around it. They don't know the right language to use. I'm sure Anne's nodding, so maybe it's similar for her. And also some negative language, and our advice is to always go for neutral language. So the example I can give there is, instead of saying that someone is suffering from Alzheimer's, we say they are living with Alzheimer's. And the reason that we do that is we're not defining that individual by their condition, and we're not making it a wholly negative thing. Individuals living with Alzheimer's can live very happy and fulfilled lives. And I think when you say someone is suffering from that condition, there's connotations that they're not, or that they can't. So that's kind of how language comes into play most often for us in eldercare.
Amazing. And Anne?
Yeah, the language is a huge part of the training that we deliver to companies, HR, line managers, mental health, first aiders. And it's something that, again, Hannah's comment about people tiptoeing around and often wanting to soften, and after a conversation, usually somebody will say, actually, somebody has died. You can't soften it. You can't alter what's happened. The the experience of grief is unique to each individual. It's as unique as the relationship between the individual and the person who's died. So we don't talk about the deceased, we'll talk about the deceased person. And the same, we never talk about the bereaved as a group, we talk about bereaved people. So we never depersonalize the individual who's died or the grieving person. It's very easy to make assumptions, which again, Hannah gave an example of with dementia. Not everyone is distraught that somebody else has died. This may be somebody who has been their abuser, but they happen to be the nearest relative. And in a sense, they have to take on responsibilities that they'd rather not. So it's very much about taking one's lead from the bereaved person, but also staying very much in the real world, not using all those awful euphemisms there are around death, of which there are vast numbers if you want to do an internet search. And Australia seems to have a whole collection unique to Australia as well, not all of which I understand. But we're talking about hundreds of euphemisms. But our policy is to use words like death and died, because as professionals who are working with people who have been recently bereaved, all of the different explanations of the experience of bereavement, all the theoretical work that's been doing, talks about people needing to recognize the reality of what has happened, and language is a large part of that. One of the things we particularly avoid, particularly if it is a child that's died, is loss. You lose somebody on the beach and the lifeguard puts out a call. Has anyone seen a little boy wearing red swimming shorts? Or you lose somebody in the supermarket. Bereaved parents feel incredibly guilty, even if there is no reason for them to do so, because as parents, it's our job to keep our children safe. And if a child dies, that engenders a sense of failure. And the other thing is, we never make assumptions. So, oh, well, it's just your uncle. That uncle may be the person who has been the parent figure in the life of your bereaved employee. So avoiding assumptions is really, really important, and listening to the reality of the situation. And for us, that communication needs to be, usually if somebody rings in and says they've been bereaved, that needs to start over the telephone and before somebody comes back to work, because how the communication is handled when somebody comes in. Some people will want to say, I don't want anyone to acknowledge it. I am very stoical. I just want to come in, sit back at my desk and get on with it. Other people will appreciate their colleagues knowing and just acknowledging what has happened, because unless somebody specifically requests that it's not ignored, having something as traumatic as a bereavement, regardless of the circumstances, ignored is very isolating for the bereaved person. Do they know? Don't they? Oh, they don't even care. They've said nothing. So that's crucial as well.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Anne. Really, really good answer. I guess just we're going to move on then. So we've just talked around communication. Then we've got what we call, I guess, the sandwich generation, when we're thinking about, I guess, the different caring responsibilities at both ends, both childcare and eldercare. I guess, how is this impacting employees? So again, Hannah, maybe start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, the sandwich generation is the group of individuals who have a childcare responsibility. They have children to look after, and they also have eldercare responsibilities as well. So they've got an elderly loved one that is needing support. And a lot of what we do at Seniorcare by Lottie is reassuring people or educating people on what caregiving really looks like. I think we all have maybe an idea or a stereotype of what that might be, and it's individuals that need really involved care, and you're delivering that care firsthand. You're helping a loved one bathe, you're helping them eat, but caregiving responsibilities can be the more of the everyday. It can be admin tasks like Anne spoke about earlier, helping someone get to an appointment, staying on top of when their appointments might be, making sure they're taking their medication, they're eating 3 meals a day. So you can kind of start to see how those day-to-day tasks come about quite quickly and quite easily. And often we're helping people who their elderly loved one was once their caregiver. It was their mum, it's their dad, and so if your mum can no longer kind of stay on top of her admin, I'm speaking for myself, that's definitely what I do for my own mum, you're suddenly in charge of all of her appointments. So somebody that is dealing with that as someone with an eldercare, an elderly loved one that's needing support. And then they also have a child dependent that needs to be taken to nursery or to school and taken out after to their, extracurricular activities and to their friends' houses. And you can start to see how there's absolutely no time for that individual that's delivering care to both those people to do their job, to have a life of their own, to do the things that they enjoy, their pastimes, their hobbies, seeing their friends, and the impact that's going to have on them.
And just in terms of that kind of that population size, Hannah, is that increasing month by month? Are we seeing that kind of demand go up because there are more people having to deal with both sides, both childcare and eldercare?
Yeah, so we're at the tipping point. So the ONS actually reported that 2025 is the point where individuals are going to tip to having more elderly dependents than they are childcare dependent. So we're currently living in this, we're right at the point in time where people are juggling both. And that is due to just exponentially grow over the years to come.
Oh, sorry. Anne, do you have any points to add to that, I guess, from a National Bereavement Service point of view?
I think just one thing, caring is exhausting. I know similarly, I, for a very brief period, became a home carer for my mother before we placed her in residential care. We held powers of attorney. I'm just going to a plug for the importance of powers of attorney, and that's one of the things that we can offer education on, as I know Lottie can as well, the importance of them. Grief is also exhausting. So if you've already had all this going on in one's life and then somebody dies, there is a huge gap of time that has been allocated to something that is then a vast empty space. That it's like, well, what do I do now? Because every moment that one would have spent caring now becomes this void of missing somebody, because you still want them there, even though if it was hard work. But grief itself is fatigue, exhaustion is a major part of normal grief, let alone when it follows this sort of caring experience.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Dan. I guess, and then if we move on to, I guess, that then the kind of the next point that's kind of linked in with this. So if we're thinking about kind of flexible work options, what flexible work options could help employees balance their work and their eldercare responsibilities? So I guess this is probably one for you again, Hannah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think flexible working is a topic that Charlotte, Anne and I have all probably spoken to the people that we work with about, because we've spoken about the financial, about the practical strain, about the emotional strain that it has, and the effects that has on someone being able to do their work, and the need for flexible work options. I think there's a version of greenwashing that goes on with flexible working, and I think a lot of employers can have like a tick box exercise where they say we offer flexible working, but does it work in practical terms for somebody that is caring for an elderly loved one and has a childcare dependent as well, someone that's going through bereavement? It's not a linear journey. I spoke about the Carers Leave Act. It's definitely a step in the right direction, but it is 10 days of unpaid care, and I think we can all agree where those limitations might be, that if somebody is caring for an elderly loved one, that doesn't fit neatly into 10 days. That journey can be so much longer. So when you're considering flexible working options, I think you just have to genuinely think about the practicalities of the life stages that your workforce are going through, and does your ideas of flexible working actually remedy those, or are they a tick box exercise which inevitably just builds a frustration with your workforce more than anything?
Amazing. I guess just on that point, I think when you made a great point around flexible working, everyone has their own definition of what that is and how they implement it. I think there was a different version of flexible working 3, 4, 5 years ago than there is now. We're seeing a lot of employees be asked to go back to the office, whether that be for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. is that having an impact on, I guess, an employee's eldercare responsibilities, and I guess, and with that increased demand as well?
I mean, you just simply can't be in two places at once. So if you have an elderly loved one that requires support or, you know, help to go and look at care homes because they're potentially considering that as an option, or be around when the council are coming to do assessments, you can't do work at the same time. So I think it's all built on trust. And if you're building a workforce where the culture is built on trust, Charlotte spoke about culture earlier, then you're looking after your workforce. The workforce are then more inclined to be present, and when they are there and when they can be there, that they will deliver the work that they need to a really high standard. So yeah, I think as we start to become maybe a bit less flexible, we're quite fortunate at Lottie that we do have flexible working that benefits, I know, individuals with various responsibilities outside of work. But yeah, it's definitely growing. I think it's important to know who in your workforce is going through these life stages and requires flexible working, and treating it on an individual basis. Maybe they can't fit neatly into your kind of standard working hours.
I think that just shows you how important flexibility is as a whole within the workforce. So yeah, no, great answer. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Can I just chip in there and say recent research has actually found that over 40% of the people interviewed felt that they had been pressured to return to work before they felt ready to do so after a bereavement. That's a big proportion of people.
Wow, it's a massive number, isn't it? And it just goes back to that point around showing how important flexibility is and making sure that you put the right structure in for your employees for each of those different life stages. So thank you very much, Anne. I guess, Charlotte, is there anything from you, or are you happy for me all to move on to the next question? Perfect. If we then think about grief, I think Anne...
Sorry, Charlotte was on mute just then, so we didn't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry, it's absolutely fine. I mean, I was going to say, you know, it is, it's very, very tough navigating your way between work and the external impacts that that affect everybody through their lives. And it's, but it's also for businesses, you know, every business is different, and so navigating one's way through that is, you know, each business takes a different view. So yeah, you know, it's hard for a lot of companies to understand how to actually direct that pathway, and also to educate other people within the organization as well, so that everybody's aligned with what the culture means, what the business is endeavoring to do, how they're really, at the end of the day, it's all about enabling your staff base to feel valued. If your staff feel valued, and therefore you're being given the time to deal with the other elements of your life, then you're going to stay within that organization. If you push back and you're always thinking about what the organization needs, people are going to react to that quite strongly. And so it kind of probably feeds into one of the other questions that we're going to address, but that balance is quite hard to strike from an employer and an employee's perspective. Is trying to marry the two up. It is not an easy thing to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Really good answer. So if we then just move on to the next question, this one will be more focused on the grief aspect, and this is probably going to be for you. So yeah, what are the long-term impacts of unresolved, unsupported grief on team performance? I'll pass the floor over to you.
Yeah. I don't know of any research that's specifically looked at teams, but there is quite a lot of information available around the impact on individuals. So, for example, and I'm just going to look away from the screen while I get the figures right. In general, people who have had a bereavement of somebody close to them will have on average 22 days off in the 6 months after they return to work, and they will be working at 70% of their capacity. And that's with a grief that's going through what one might call a normal trajectory. So although grief is unique to individuals, because it is a universal experience, we know that there are feelings, behaviours, experiences that are in common to lots of people. So for example, if I was talking to somebody quite often after about 3 months and they've tried going back to work, they had a bit of an emotional meltdown, and somebody said to them, oh, you need counselling. And my reaction is often, well, it's only 3 months. I will not in the least bit surprised you've had a bit of an emotional meltdown, especially if somebody has said something that's been a specific trigger around the person who's died, or perhaps they're on a call team and they've spoken to somebody with exactly the same accent that their granny had. That can be hugely triggering for somebody. So there is an immediate impact even after people come to work. There is no set length of time to how long a normal grief lasts. Sometimes people can report that the second year is more difficult than the first, because during the first year, people are tending to remember that this person has been bereaved and will be making some allowances. But after that length of time, oh, well, you should be fine by now. You should be over it. We never get over the death of somebody close to us, important to us. We adjust to learn to live with them not being with us physically, and we have to renegotiate those relationships. Now, I don't want to get into the depths of grief theory today, but we are changed permanently when this happens to us. It's difficult for companies because obviously there is a need for service continuity, absolutely, but equally, particularly if it's a company that uses people with lone workers, one needs to be fairly certain that they're going to be okay out whatever it is they're doing on their own. So the other thing is that counselling in the proper sense of counselling, as opposed to good listening, is really something that people only have the energy to engage in some months after the death. It's not to say that they might not need some support sooner, particularly if it's something traumatic or even something that's happened in the workplace. So people might need an immediate debriefing. If somebody has died at work, then it may well be that you need somebody on site to cope and debrief the team and offer immediate support. So there's a huge variety of possibilities. I'm just sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, the annual impact on the UK economy has been estimated between 14 and 49 billion pounds annually. So the midpoint of that is 22.9 billion. Now, whatever any individual company's turnover is, that can be proportioned down. So yes, there are economic benefits. And if somebody is bereaved and has not progressed, I'm not going to say healed because it's not an illness, it's a normal human experience, but they will be carrying an emotional wound, a hidden disability that may emerge at a later stage. Charlotte, sorry, I know you're wanting
not to worry at all. I was just going to mention that obviously there are so many different aspects to grief as well, and whilst in the traditional sense we tend to think of grief as having lost, apologies, I'm not going to use the word lose or a loss or what have you, but where somebody has died who we are very close to and who we love very dearly, in our sense as well, any form of miscarriage and indeed treatment that has failed is also a level of significant grief for many people. And so whilst we consider grief as, generally speaking, God willing, in the eldercare bracket, or there might be a tragic accident or something that's enabled somebody to be no longer with us. Grief is such a broad experience and happens within so many different areas of life, not necessarily just in death, but also in the different areas that we're talking about today. So it's being aware of the fact that, you know, 1 in 4 women are likely to go through a miscarriage. That in itself is very traumatic physically and emotionally, and the grief that, you know, comes from that. And some women go through multiple miscarriages, so it's happening over and over again and they don't understand why. And so having the time to be able to handle that and to deal with it and to take the time out in the same way that you might be able to take time away from work if you've experienced a death in your family or what have you, is where the fertility piece is moving, because it's such a big challenge.
And also, I mean, I'm very aware that it's so often a hidden bereavement. It's not something that necessarily will have been shared by very many people, and even other family members will have difficulty grieving for a potential baby, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, particularly if it's in very early stages, so there's not even been a noticeable bump. So it's a very isolating form of bereavement, because many women don't realise how frequent an experience it is.
And it's therefore even more prevalent to be able to need to have that open conversation and have a community of, or a committee of people that are readily available to help people to navigate their way through that trauma. So being able to talk about it, it comes back to that point, really.
Perfect. We've also had a question through just about the re-emergence of grief following an anniversary. I guess, Anne, are you happy to, or Charlotte, happy to kind of touch on that, I guess, for your respective areas quickly?
Yeah, that's, I would say that's almost something that's expected. If I'm chatting with somebody, I will say there are certain things you can anticipate. There are certain dates that were significant on your calendar. And even after a very long time, those dates remain important. Sometimes it can be helpful for people to develop small rituals. They light a candle, have it by a photograph. For some people, it will mean visiting a grave, might mean going somewhere special. Those things, in a way, people can plan for those. Sometimes, though, there can be things that take people completely by surprise. Things like, I mentioned before, somebody having the same accent, for example, or somebody coming from the same town that just takes you completely by surprise. And that can trigger that resurgence. But yes, it's a very normal and common experience.
The concept of triggering as well is also very important when it comes to trying to have a family, because there are, and we work with a big client at the moment actually, who are implementing a number of key processes, so that, you know, because there's a difficult balance between people who are struggling to have a family and have children, but also people who have had children and who have had a newborn baby and they want to celebrate that, and companies that have got family days that they're delivering and what have you, and trying to marry up both challenges at the same time is not easy, because those people who have just recently had a baby and want to celebrate that and bring their baby into work because they're on maternity leave or what have you, and that's a key exciting thing to do, are triggering those people who are still on a fertility journey. So trying to, I think from an HR perspective, that's not an easy pathway to navigate as well, and being mindful of the very key triggering elements for people who are struggling in the fertility zone, with people that want to celebrate the fact that they've got a family, and, you know, businesses that are very family orientated. That's quite a difficult thing to do.
And another instance which can be very difficult to navigate is, we work very closely with victim support and their homicide service, but inquests and trials can be hugely difficult for families because of necessity. They recount the events that happened. Now, they often don't happen for months, even a year or more after the death, but it drags people back to that very beginning. in some cases, it will be the first time they hear some of that evidence about what their relative or friend went through at the time of the death. So hugely difficult and demanding times for people.
Amazing. Thank you. And I guess we've just been talking about grief, the effect it can have on an individual. I guess what measures can be taken to balance the need for compassion whilst maintaining workplace productivity? And I guess, Hannah, I'll pass over to you to kick us off here, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. I suppose beyond what we've covered already on fostering a culture based on trust, the next piece that I think is really important is seeking the right kind of support. I mentioned earlier that no one is expected to be experts in every single life stage that any employee might go through. That's a very big responsibility to take on. And the sooner that HR teams realize that, but they also actively seek the support of organizations and experts who are able to deliver that, then you start to see some really genuinely helpful benefits that are helping their workforce stay maintain a workplace productivity, but then also there's absolute compassion there, that they have taken the time to seek out the right kind of support for someone that's actually going to help them. A lot of the individuals that we speak to through Seniorcare by Lottie talk about just being able to speak to someone else and share that burden. Burden is a term that is used all the time in our conversations. And being able to share that with somebody through our dedicated care expert service. They can speak to someone as many times as they like for however long. It's unlimited. So, again, it's not a tick box that has meant we support individuals that are going through caregiving responsibilities. We actually give them access to experts that offer a comprehensive service, which will obviously then help that individual stay present within their workplace and deliver the things that they need to as a professional, but then also feeling supported by the benefit.
Just on that point, when we're thinking about, I guess, finding that right balance and I guess maintaining workplace productivity, having the right list of services, products available is one thing, but then obviously going back to that point around education and communication is another. So how often do the clients that you work with communicate these product services to their employees to ensure that they are aware of what you do and how you can support them through these different life stage moments?
Yeah, I think that's been a steep learning curve when we started to build Seniorcare by Lottie and roll it out to different organisations. Is every HR team has a different way of working. They have a different way of communicating with their workforce. The first step for us is kind of signing up with a company, but the next thing is making sure that every single person within that workforce that might be going through a caregiving journey is aware that the service exists. It's a hard one to get right every single time because, like I said, every organisation is different. And I think we're still actively working to do it as best as we can. But we do road shows. We go and put ourselves physically in the environment. If people are in offices, then being in a canteen for a day. I've travelled all around the UK to the very very nice canteens across our partners. I think different things work. Other people will want emails to go out. Other people will want a poster on the back of the toilet door. Different things work for different people, and we've definitely not cracked it.
Amazing. And then
can I come in on that one?
I was about to pass it over to Anne or Charlotte as well for your views as well.
We provide the companies we work with a microsite to add on to their intranets. We will actually provide comms, launch comms, ongoing comms. We can provide webinars on relevant topics for staff to opt into, which usually will be recorded. So shift staff who might find it difficult to get to one in this sort of time of day can still access. So there's a whole range of things that can be done. We will link in with things like grief awareness, suicide awareness weeks, all those types of headline topics that are announced. We can work with companies to provide material for them to use with the workforce.
Amazing. And Charlotte, I guess from an IVF perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot that businesses can do to support people who are going through any form of fertility related challenge, and that's not necessarily people who are just going through fertility treatment or want or need to start going through it today or tomorrow. It's people who might be suffering from endometriosis or PCOS or male infertility issues, or who might be thinking that they need to go down a donor or a surrogacy route. So it's very, very broad, and also the miscarriage and baby loss piece is a we actually find with businesses it's largely that area that really starts the conversation. And a lot of businesses have built committees around the baby loss piece because it's a highly traumatic experience for anybody who's in the workplace and anybody at all. So from our perspective, providing a really supportive community is absolutely pivotal, because it's a very isolating experience when you're going through any form of fertility related problem, because you feel like you're the only one that's having this problem because everybody else around you seems to be getting pregnant and you're not, and you feel like a terrible failure. So community, and we have a community forum actually at the IVF Network where we have thousands of people all helping each other and talking to each other and providing that support mechanism. And again, the education piece is absolutely crucial, and that we have very key workshops and e-learning tools and broadcast material that is available for line managers, HR managers, and the business, which really helps the business overall, but also for employees to help them to, if they're considering thinking about which clinic they might want to use to take them through their fertility journey, or where they might go for counselling, or how they might mitigate stress when they're at work and trying to go through a fertility journey, nutritional plans. Actually, a lot of the stuff that we do is actually very, very broad, so it encompasses all sorts of wellness experiences as well within it that feed into the fertility piece. So it is nutrition, it is exercise, it's lifestyle, very much lifestyle related. And obviously lifestyle when you're working can be challenging for many people in a working environment, especially if you're working in a very urban environment. You're still back in an office having to commute. I mean, I've got crazy stories of going through a fertility journey where I live part-time in the countryside and part-time in London, and I was on the GWR train and had to inject myself intramuscularly with a progesterone injection, and the only time I could do it, because it's very time specific, was in the loo on the train. And the train is moving very, very quickly, and I'm wobbling around all over the place trying to intramuscularly inject myself. So all of these things impact you when you're at work and commuting and what have you, and it's being aware of what people are going through in order to be able to have a family and continue their work accordingly.
Amazing example and brilliant answer. Thank you very much, Charlotte. And again, just a quick reminder to everyone that's online, please submit your questions. We have got 12 minutes left, and we will try our best to answer as many as we can before the end of today's session. We have got a couple more questions to go through. So again, Charlotte, I think this is another one probably for you here, but I'll pass over to the panel as well afterwards. But where, if any, should companies draw the line when it comes to supporting the creation of life?
I'm not sure there is a line to be drawn, really. I mean, and the creation of life, obviously, potentially, we're not talking about, and we don't handle or manage the adoption piece, but we are trying to help anybody that's going through any fertility related issue that they might have physically and emotionally or what have you. And I think, we've heard examples from people who have found at work that people don't know what to say to them because they just don't know what to say. And so they're actually eyes down to the floor and sort of trying to pretend that they're not there because they don't actually want to address that person if they happen to know that they've just had a miscarriage or what have you, which is the worst thing in the world. And that feeds back into the supportive community piece and actually having that open cultural element, but also putting an infrastructure in. I've also heard examples of people who are trying to have very sensitive conversations, and this probably is across the board, actually, not necessarily just within the the fertility area, but you're trying to have a conversation that's very sensitive with a clinician because you've just done an embryo transfer, or you're about to do an egg collection, or you've just been to your GP and you're getting results based on the fact you've got really bad endometriosis or whatever it is, and there's nowhere to go because there isn't a boardroom to walk into, or there isn't, somebody I spoke to recently who works for one of our clients was saying she found herself standing in the corridor trying to have a muted conversation in head office, and it was a really difficult position that she found herself in, and therefore there are like little something that we've sort of endorsed and that is quite good. There are little like telephone cubicles that you can install in offices, where people have conference calls or whatever, they're sort of stand up or what have you, but at least you can walk into something that's not a boardroom, or there can be if it's not one of those, it can be a safe space where you can go and take a call if it's not a work call, but that is sensitive. And I think that's one of the biggest challenging issues, is trying to, you don't know when a call's going to come in. It doesn't happen to be over your lunch break or what have you when you're out getting a sandwich. So I think that the pivotal things really are, creating that community and that open conversation piece, and then being able to make people feel safe, that they can have the conversation. There are obviously policies in place, and a policy is great. And we provide a fertility toolkit to businesses, which basically take them through the whole breadth of what really companies need to be looking at. But making sure that people are aware that those policies and those toolkits exist, and that, people are, really that they are compassionate to what people are going through. And the more compassionate people are, and the more there are allowances for what people are able to do, the better the commitment of the employee to the business, and the greater the retention and the long-term benefit, because it's expensive losing staff, and many people have to leave businesses because they just can't cope with the pressures of a career within that particular organization whilst going through some kind of fertility trauma. So the more comfortable it is, the less expensive to a business it actually is, even though it might feel that it's a it's an upheaval if somebody, to be able to give that person time off or whatever they need. It's actually in the long run much better value to a business to look after that individual, make sure they feel valued and cared for, and then they will come back and give everything that they've got to that business.
I love that answer, Charlotte. I think that's you said a lot of points which will probably resonate with a lot of the people on today's session. So just on the interest of time, we've got one more question, and then I'm keen just to kind of make sure that we've got time to answer questions from anyone in the audience. This is going to be aimed at all of you. It's relevant for all of the different product services that you provide to your clients. But I guess, how can employers ensure that they're supporting employees throughout every single life stage? So I feel like we've touched on this on a few of the different questions today, but are there any other points that you'd like to touch on, whether that be the creation of different policies, procedures? Maybe Anne, this time I'll start with you, and then we can pass around maybe then to Hannah. Then
at the moment, only about a third of companies have a bereavement policy, as opposed to a general leave policy. That's not nearly enough. And then sometimes the stories we hear, it's more lip service than anything else. So we have a template policy that we're very comfortable to share with companies. We actually have free downloadable literature on the website that employers can give to their employees when there's been a bereavement, actual practical tools they can use. So desperately important, because just building on what Charlotte was saying, 5% of bereaved people will leave after 6 months if they haven't felt cared for during their bereavement. That's a huge turnover. And as Charlotte was saying, huge cost to the business. All the investment that's been put into those people. So basically, we're here to work with anybody who wants support, either with their business policies and procedures, but also in terms of the education people and training, and the individual support as a benefit, which includes a free helpline.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anne. Hannah, I guess from your side, from an eldercare point of view?
Yeah, I know that Charlotte has spoken about networks a lot, and I definitely echo that. We work with a lot of organisations that have carers networks. Just a note on that we've had lots of feedback from companies that have started to build carers networks. They started off by having a carers and parents network, and they quickly realised how hugely irrelevant a lot of the information was to both parties, so separating those two, but that's kind of a side point. But yeah, I think building spaces to allow individuals that are going through key life stages to come forward when they feel comfortable, and start engaging with them, and that will give you, as HR professionals, a really good idea of what your workforce are dealing with behind closed doors in their personal life. Equally, asking for their feedback, ask them, speak to them. It can be anonymised, but just to gauge what's going on at home, instead of trying to make an assumption yourself of what might be the most useful benefit. And to that, I think not assuming what someone might be going through based on their age or their gender or their seniority in a company. You know, I cared for my mum when I was 22 years old, and I don't think most people will say, oh, you know, well, feedback we'll sometimes get if we pitch to a company and they say, oh, our workforce is too young. But that's not, I don't think that's true. And I think that's a mistake that people can make about bereavement, or about, you know, you don't know when someone's starting their fertility journey. You don't know when somebody has to take on eldercare responsibilities. It can be the most junior person in the company, the most senior person in the company. They can be any age. So don't make any assumptions, and just speak to your workforce, ask what they need, and do it in a way that's sensitive and gives them a safe space to do that.
I'm a big fan of that. I think making assumptions can be the biggest mistake a company can make. But then also, more importantly, listening to your employees and understanding exactly what their wants and needs are should be their number one priority. So yeah, a great answer. Thank you very much, Hannah. And I guess, Charlotte, just before we close off today's session and go on to the couple of questions that we've received. I guess, from an IVF point of view, I guess, do you have any points you'd like to add?
Yes, I mean, I'm just going to talk back about sort of the bill. I think if nothing else, making sure the relevant policies are in place, but also I think building small committees of people that address the different pathways that we're talking about through life is really, really important. So I think that's key as a starting point to then discuss which direction a business wants to take, you know, the support piece for each of these areas. But it's just, you know, people are feeling very isolated in the particular situation that they are going through, and they're trying to balance everything and work and everything else, and stress is is a very big problem. So just looking at how businesses can support that, and create the relevant networks and documentation and education to help people navigate the way through it is really key.
Amazing.
Can I just add, Dan, I think what's even more important is for those companies that deal with bereaved people as clients, all of this becomes even more important. So you think of banks, building societies, all sorts of businesses, local authorities, hospitals, they all have bereaved people as their clients and customers as well. So this becomes even more vital.
Amazing. Well, you've been in an amazing panel of guests, so we can only say thank you for your appearance and your time today. So I'm sure the audience will say the same thing. I guess there are a couple of more questions just before we close off, and we've got 2 minutes left, and they look like they're both directed at you, Anne, actually.
Oh, sorry.
So someone has asked where they can find the links for the templates that you've mentioned. Are they on your website, and if so, where?
If you look on quick guides on our website, which is www.nbs.org.uk, but put National Bereavement Service in and you'll find us. I've had complete mental blank on that, sorry. Some of them are there, others of them we would want to have an individual conversation with you as to what's going to be the best fit. But Amazing. Please talk to us regardless.
And the second one is someone's actually asked why we shouldn't say passed away instead of died.
It's another euphemism. It's a very common one. I've had to learn to live with it. I don't like it. At the end of the day, For me, it's take your lead from the person who is bereaved as to language they're comfortable with. I have had an instance where somebody said to me, or somebody came back to work and said, oh, my wife snuffed it. And I said, well, that tells you they don't want to talk about it. They're defending it. They're making light of it. Back off with the sympathy. But in general, always acknowledge. What's more important is to say something, even if it's clumsy. Acknowledge that something difficult has happened, and then you can get into a conversation.
Amazing. Thank you. I guess, well, first and foremost, and thank you very much again. In terms of everyone that's still on the call, please feel free to either reach out to someone in the Thanks Ben team or Anne, Hannah, Charlotte directly. If you want more information about any of their services, we'll be more than happy to help. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for joining us and giving us an hour of your time. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.